Welcome, everyone. I see lots of people joining us on this webinar, Financial Wellness for People with Disabilities. We're so glad to have you all with us. I'm going to start introductions in just a few seconds, just to see if we can get as many people as possible into the webinar before we start. So my name is Liz Fust. I am the founder and executive director of Gathering Strength, which is a nonprofit in Louisville, Kentucky, for people who can't see me, who are on the phone, or who are blind or have low vision. I am a white person with short hair and glasses and a forest-themed jacket on. Gathering Strength is a nonprofit I mentioned in Louisville, Kentucky, that serves people with disabilities. We empower people with disabilities to achieve better health, increase self-sufficiency, and become more engaged in the community. A few housekeeping things before we get started. We are in a very large group here, so this is a webinar, which means you cannot unmute or turn on your video. You will be able to ask questions in the Q&A. If you look at your menu on the bottom or the top of your screen, you should see Q&A. That's where you can ask questions. If you're unable to type and you want to ask questions, we are happy to answer questions at the end of this webinar. If you want to call us or send us an email, you can contact us through the Gathering Strength website. If you want a certificate of participation, there will be a form for you to complete that has two simple questions about this webinar. We will give you the link later in the webinar, and the link will be provided on a survey that you will receive immediately at the end of this webinar. When you fill out that form, you will need to carefully put your email address in there, because if your email address isn't correct, you won't get the certificate. With such a large group, we may not be able to answer everyone's questions, but we'll do the best we can. And again, we're happy to answer questions after the webinar. We are recording this webinar, and we will put it on our YouTube channel, and we will send out a link to everyone with that. Please be sure to check your spam, junk, promotions, and for government folks, your quarantine folders, because our emails are unfortunately being sent there. You may also want to talk to your email administrator. For those of us who are speaking, that's C and me, we're doing our best to face the camera and speak slowly and clearly so people can understand us, and people who read lips will be able to follow what we're saying. And I keep looking down and breaking my own rule. So I am now going to introduce Ce Garrison, who is our presenter today. Ce Garrison is the Policy and Advocacy Supervisor and the City Program Manager at the Louisville Metro Office of Financial Empowerment in Louisville, Kentucky. Ce is a certified financial counselor, financial social worker, economic mobility coach, and a certified community action professional. They travel the country speaking on financial empowerment strategies, help city governments and other nonprofits with their financial empowerment efforts, and actively train providers and consumers in Louisville on a regular basis. Prior to this work, Ce worked with homeless services programs, youth with disabilities, substance use disorder treatment and reentry programs. And we're thankful and delighted to have C here to make this presentation. We will have time for questions, so feel free to put questions in the Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz. So as Liz said, my name is Ce Garrison, and I am going to be talking, if I can get the presentation to move, I'll be talking a little bit today about several aspects of financial empowerment, really focusing on some different strategies, and there are things sprinkled throughout the presentation when you receive the slide deck at the end of the presentation to kind of help jog your memory about some of the things that we've discussed today, but that also provide clickable links to various different resources as they're referenced in the presentation. So to start out, things we're going to be talking about today, budgets and spending plans, building savings and safety nets, managing debt, growing your credit, spotting scams, some resources, and then action steps. There will be, as Liz mentioned, a Q&A somewhere towards the kind of first third of the presentation. And then there will also be an opportunity later on in the presentation to ask questions. And then if you can see the slide here, there is a light bulb inside of an orange circle. Anytime you see that on any of these slides, that's a quick tip that may have a link associated with it, or just something to remember as you're looking back over these slides later. And I will also be saying quick tip anytime we have those come up. All right. So I wanted to start off, I think one of the things that we hear a lot when we're talking about financial empowerment, when we're talking about budgeting or spending, is this concept of want versus need. Is this something that an individual that we're working with, or when we're looking at our own budget, that we could do with or without? And I like to start off these types of presentations by really challenging this thought that we have about what is a want or a need, because as with everything that we talk about with budgeting, with financial needs, it's highly individualized. And what may be a want for me, that may very well be a need for someone else. So I'm going to go through these one by one, and just think to yourself as I read them, do you consider this just right off the bat when you think about it a want or a need? So the first one, internet service. So I think if you asked people maybe 10, 15, 20 years ago, if internet service was a want or a need, most people would say a want. But in this day and age, with so many things connected on the internet, with things like work from home employment, with things like social connection or streaming services, those sorts of things, internet service has become more of a need than ever. Right. Water. So I think most people would say water is a need. And I think that one's pretty easy. We all need water to live. Some people may use tap water, or they may use bottled water. And so there's a spectrum maybe of considering within water what might be a want versus a need. The next one, home delivered meals. So when people hear home delivered meals, they may think something like a Meals on Wheels program, or they may think of something like a DoorDash or an Uber Eats or something of that nature. Again, I think that for some individuals, home delivered meals are absolutely a need. For other individuals, it could be a want. or a matter of convenience. A game console, like an Xbox or PlayStation. When I present this presentation in person, I think this is the one that gets the most kind of challenge from either side. Many people thinking this is a want, many people thinking this is an absolute need. And I think, again, it's highly individualized. It can depend, but a lot of people may use a game console to connect with friends, or they may use a game console as a way of having activities or hobbies that they do that could very well be cheaper and more accessible than other activities. Air conditioning. If you're like me, air conditioning, absolutely a need. Some folks may be fine using a fan. Maybe you live in a different part of the country where air conditioning isn't as common. Here in Louisville, I would not want to be in July without air conditioning, especially this current past July. A pet. This is another one that often has a lot of conversation, a lot of back and forth about, is this a want or a need? And again, it's very dependent upon a person's situation. Rent or mortgage. So I think housing is something that many people consider a need. There is a lot of discussion that could be had about, is renting more practical than owning or vice versa? And that is something that is very important to keep in mind, especially as we're thinking about common misconceptions about homeownership and receiving benefits like SSI or SSDI. Just kind of thinking about the source of someone's housing. Uber, Lyft, and taxis. So again, this is very dependent on where somebody may live. Is a bus line available? Do they have a family member or a friend that is willing to and able to take them somewhere if they need to go? If not, maybe an Uber or Lyft is a necessity. Maybe the public transportation that's accessible to their community is not accessible to them. So it's another one that often has a little bit of conversation about it. Okay, so with all of that in mind, thinking about the fact that wants and needs are very individualized, when we talk about budgeting and spending plans, one thing that I think is very, very important to keep in mind is that a budget, if it feels like it is limiting your life, if it feels like it is preventing you from having or doing things that are important to you, then maybe the budget needs to be revised a little bit. Because as financial counselors and as professionals, we want people to live in a budget that helps them to still feel fulfilled, happy. We want the things that we want, right? And so it's not so much about limiting ourselves as it is about just knowing where things are going and figuring out a plan that works. So some big overarching themes of what we're going to talk about is knowing your income, all income sources, whether those sources are official or unofficial. So for example, maybe someone receives SSI or employment income, but maybe they sell items that they no longer want on Facebook Marketplace, or they sell them on eBay. You would maybe consider that to be non-traditional income that's very infrequent, but we still want to know when those things might be coming in. We also want a comprehensive list of expenses. We want to make sure that when we are speaking about expenses, we are thinking about all of the monthly bills that we have that come out regularly, but we also want folks to be thinking about, if you go to the gas station and you buy a drink there, you want to be keeping track of those kinds of things, because sometimes for folks, it's those very small things that start to add up And when we can't figure out a gap in a budget, it's most likely that that will be the part that is confusing. We also, as I said, we want to choose a system that works. So I am very much in my own personal budget, somebody that likes a pen and paper. I have a dry erase board that I'm using to keep track of my bills so that they're up on a wall. Some people really like an app, or they like to use their phone or their computer. Some people love Excel spreadsheets. I am not that person. But if it works for you, then that's what matters. We also just want to be prepared always to revise the budget. Um, for example, I was mentioning air conditioning before. For me, my electric bill is going to be a lot higher in the summertime than it is in the wintertime because I'm running the air conditioner all the time. I get hot very easily. Um, and when we're talking about tracking spending, maybe you are a person who twice a year you update your wardrobe. So that wouldn't be a consistent monthly expense, but we know that it's maybe a bigger expense that we're not expecting. And so we always want to be keeping track. The next piece that's important is just prioritizing essentials first. So for many people, those three main buckets are housing, food, and healthcare. We also want to adjust our extras to balance our cash flow. And so what I mean by that is, for example, maybe we need a little extra income over the next 3 months because of an unexpected expense. So maybe that means for the next 3 months, we have to cancel our Netflix subscription. But as soon as that expense is paid for and caught up, then we can return to having those kinds of things. We will talk a little bit more in a few slides about bank and credit union accounts, the benefits that those can provide for folks, but it's not always the best solution for everyone. And so while we talk about banks and credit unions and we like to talk about the benefits of those, if a banking or credit union based system is not effective for you, then we can also talk about other ways of maximizing income and being able to include all of these spending plan items that we've talked about in a cash-based system. And so my quick tip here for budgeting and spending plans is that every payday, you should review your spending over the last payday and the budget that you've set for yourself for the month, whether that is a monthly paycheck that you receive or a monthly SSI check, or if you get paid every week or every day. Okay, anytime you see this woman with the black curly hair and the black shirt, this is a case study. So our case study individual, her name is Linda. If you hear me talk about Linda, this is an example person that we're using. So Linda here, a lot of the tools and resources that I'm talking about in slides, we will use Linda as the practical example of how those things play out in the real world. So Linda is a 28-year-old woman living with type 1 diabetes. This is an autoimmune condition in which the body cannot produce insulin or enough insulin, depending on severity. She was diagnosed after a hospitalization for diabetic ketoacidosis, which is when she found out that she had it. She is on Medicaid and receiving SSI. Medicaid will cover insulin vials and syringes at a $30 copay a month. It will pay for freestyle testing supplies, which is the test strips and the lancets, at 200 of each a month. It will also pay for endocrinology appointments and labs as long as it is at the preferred lab testing site, which is not her doctor's office. Now let's talk about what Medicaid will not cover. Medicaid will not cover insulin pens, the auto injector pens, which because she has some mobility challenges in her hands, she needs those insulin pens, but Medicaid will not cover them. They will not cover the alcohol swabs that are needed for preparing the injection site. They will not pay for a continuous glucose monitor for her because she's not had the diagnosis long enough. She needs 20 additional test strips and lancets for her care management every month that go over the 200 that health insurance will pay for. They will not pay for her phone and data to track her glucose. They don't pay for the reader device. She will need her phone in order to track the glucose readings that she gets from her monitor. They don't pay her transportation to the lab site every month, and she's not near a bus line. They don't pay for compression garments, compression socks, or the lotion that she needs for foot care. And they also will not pay for podiatry appointments for foot care, which, if you know anything about type 1 diabetes, foot care is a very essential part of maintaining diabetic health. So here's what we need to know about Linda for financial coaching. Linda's on Medicaid and she works part-time. So she gets $967 a month for Medicaid, $725 a month for her part-time job. Her mom also gives her $200 a month, which she is not reporting anywhere, and she's receiving that in cash. So if we calculate all of the income that she has coming in a month, she has $1,892 monthly. She's not presently using a bank account and uses the Direct Express card for her Social Security. I'm sorry, I don't know why the presentation above says Medicaid. That she's receiving from the Social Security Administration, she gets via the Direct Express card. Otherwise, she takes her paycheck to the bank to cash it, and she receives the $200 a month from her mom. She uses Venmo to send her portion of housing payments to her roommate and has expressed maybe getting the Venmo debit card. And she has goals. Her first one is to save $500 so that she can get her cat a dental procedure. And her roommate received a notice that their rent is going to go up by $200 a month at renewal. So we talk with Linda. We find out about her monthly expenses. She's paying half of the rent, utilities, internet and streaming services. She's paying for a cell phone bill, a bus pass. Other transportation calculates in things like Uber and Lyft for places that aren't close to the bus line. She's paying $250 a month in groceries, which has gone up significantly as she has been having to prioritize things like fresh produce, leaner meats as a part of her care management, and inflation is definitely a consideration. It's $175 a month for extra testing supplies. She does receive a manufacturer discount card for her insulin pens, so it makes it a little bit cheaper for her. She has a credit card. The total that she owes on that is just a little bit less than $2,000. She's currently making minimum payments monthly for that. Then we have her cat expenses, which she has to pay in additional medical visits. She prioritizes $50 for going out with her friends twice a month and $50 on other expenses. So this means that Linda's total expenses for the month are $1,827, which leaves her with $65 a month left over. She doesn't have any savings. And at the end of the month, she doesn't see that $65, so she's not entirely sure where it's going. So perhaps the first place, because Linda expressed that she does not have a bank account, but she's considering getting a debit card, perhaps the place that we might start is by talking about bank accounts. And I want to draw your attention to what's called a bank on account. So here in Louisville, we have our Bank on Louisville Coalition, which is a coalition of nonprofits, government entities, and financial institutions that meet, get together, and also advocate for these functional checking accounts that go through this national certification that certify them as safe, functional, and affordable. If you can see this map over on the right-hand side of the presentation, it shows the states in the US that have access to bank on accounts, and that is all 50 states. All bank on accounts, if you go to the financial institution's website, will have a seal on them that show when the account was certified. When a financial institution gets one of their accounts certified, it remains certified for 2 years before they then have to recertify the account. And I point that out because I want to make sure that folks know that it's not a situation that's like, sometimes you'll hear with a credit card, 0% APR for 2 years, and then it goes away. This is not that kind of a situation. If they want to be recertified, they have to maintain that same criteria. These accounts don't allow for overdraft. They have low or no fees, and they can be good for individuals who are new account holders, for folks that maybe have had banking trouble in the past. If you have fear or mistrust of a financial institution, a bank on account can be a really good way to avoid some of those more stressful functions of a traditional account. And if you just want or need limited features to the account. For example, all bank on accounts are checklist checking. So if you're not a person that uses checks, it could be a good option. There are over 500 nationally certified bank on accounts. Here in Louisville, we have 12 certified accounts. Just because a bank or a financial institution has a certified account does not mean that all of their accounts are certified. So if you are interested in knowing more about a bank on account, there is a link, joinbankon.org, that you can go to find out if there's a financial institution near you and research the features of those accounts. So I'm going to pause for questions right after this slide. But this slide, another visit with Linda, this checklist that I have provided on this slide can be helpful if somebody is trying to decide maybe between several bank accounts. They're not sure where to start. They just kind of want to compare and contrast different accounts. I would encourage maybe using this account checklist because different features of accounts may be important differently for anybody looking for a bank account. I, for example, prioritize a bank account that provides roundups for savings, which I'll talk about later. But essentially, if I spend $1.50 on my bank card, they will round that up to $2 and put that 50 cents into my savings account. So it's an automated savings feature. Okay, so before we go into budgeting, I will pause for a moment to find out if there are any questions, if anybody has any feedback or things that they want to know about.
Thanks, C. There were just some questions about what was meant by Medicaid, and you clarified, pardon me, that you were referring to SSI. Yeah. And so there's really been no question about the substance of what you've said. And I think you can continue on.
Okay, great. Yes, I apologize. Before we send the slides out, I will make sure that that gets corrected. Okay. So talking a little bit about budgeting. A first recommendation about budgeting that we often talk about is what's called zero-based budgeting. So that means if we have $1,000 a month that we're working with, we are telling that entire $1,000 where to go. We're not leaving a single dollar without some account to go into. So that may mean putting it into a savings account or paying your rent, buying groceries, but we want everything to have a place. One very common practical budgeting solution is what's called percentage-based budgeting. This link that is included here will take you to an online form where you can put in your income and it will tell you exactly what your 50% wants, 30% needs, and 20% savings should be. So if you are a nerdy person like me and the 50% wants isn't quite enough detail, we want to spend 50% of our income or less every month on wants. 30% of that should go to the rent or mortgage, and then 20% to our living expenses. Next, 30% wants. As I mentioned before, wants versus needs is a deeply personal decision, but many wants are things like eating out, streaming services, gifts that you may buy for other people, treating yourself, travel or vacation, donations that you may make to organizations or causes that you care about. And then 20% should go to savings and or debt repayment. So this includes loans, having an emergency fund for savings, any sort of large purchase. Large purchase, again, kind of depends on your financial situation, the budget that you're working with. In my house, we say anything over $300 is considered a large purchase. You want to be careful with asset limits, especially with a windfall payment or a gift, especially if you're concerned about SSI or SSDI and hitting your asset limit. A windfall payment might be, maybe you hit the lottery and so you win $1,000. That could be considered a windfall payment. I will talk a little bit about ABLE accounts, but I'm not going to go super in depth because there will be a webinar coming up on September 17th to talk more about ABLE accounts, but that is something that can be useful in this 20% savings or debt repayment category. So as we're talking about Linda, maybe one support that she could use or that many folks can use is meeting with a certified work incentive coordinator to discuss impairment related work expenses. Can this help with her transportation costs? Can she work extra hours without losing benefits? There will be a webinar, which is linked here, on October 8th to talk about working while on benefits, to hear from a real life CWIC who can answer all of your questions about working while on benefits. And there may be other benefits that can help to reduce costs, such as SNAP or health savings cards, utilizing things like a farmer's market share or something like that can also, some people use, for example, gardening as a way to reduce their food costs. So many different options to explore. So we return to Linda. I used that link in the previous couple of slides that I mentioned will break down your totals. Currently, Linda is spending $1,682 a month on needs, $100 a month on wants, and then $45 a month on debt. She does not have savings. If you use that 50%, 30%, 20% formula we were talking about, her needs should be around $946 a month. Her wants should be around $568 a month. And then her savings and debt should be around $378 a month. So in her particular case, the needs are far outspending where she should be. That is not an uncommon situation for individuals to be in. But we are going to talk maybe some strategies that could be of assistance to her. So building a safety net. When we talk about savings, sometimes, and I found this to be particularly true of the individuals that we serve, that savings often has to come after paying down or reducing debt because we have to prioritize getting those accounts paid before we can build into the savings. However, inevitably, when we wait to start saving, something happens. Your fridge breaks, your car breaks down, you maybe fall and hurt your ankle and have to go to physical therapy or something. There's always something that happens. And so when we talk about building a safety net and building savings, habit and putting this habit into your monthly or weekly expenses is way more important than the amount. And that's the quick tip that I want to provide for savings, is that building up a consistent routine of savings matters way more than how much we're putting in there. If what you can afford to put in your savings is $1 a month, hey, that counts. And we will celebrate that every time because that's one more dollar in savings that you didn't have before. In general, what we recommend in terms of an emergency savings fund is $1,000, but that's not doable for everyone. On the low end of emergency savings, we like for folks to maybe have $400 or so in their savings account. Some ways that we can help with that: automating your savings. So I referred to roundups before, and we'll talk about that in a couple of slides, but making sure that you're able to set it and forget it can be very helpful for some folks. Able accounts, so those accounts, which we'll talk about again in a little bit, can help with building a safety net that isn't going to affect your asset limit. Trusts, special needs trusts can be helpful for long-term planning. If a parent is thinking about how to leave a legacy to a child, and the asset limitations are a concern, special needs trusts can be very helpful in those sorts of things. And then we want to use FDIC insured savings products. So FDIC stands for Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. If you have a bank account, you very likely see the FDIC seal when you log into your account, meaning that those accounts are insured by the full faith of the federal government. ABLE accounts. So ABLE stands for Achieving a Better Life Experience. That act was passed into law in 2014. It allows individuals to save up to $17,000 a year, but does not count against your SSI or Medicaid benefits. And you can use it for there's a whole list of disability related expenses that you're able to tap into. So you can use it to pay for education, for housing, technology, living expenses, work supplies. The list is very long. It's tax-free savings, and then it allows individuals to save and invest in their future without losing their needs-based benefits. The link at the bottom of this webpage is the ABLE National Resource Center, which can help individuals identify what their state ABLE network looks like, what their state ABLE accounts look like. Here in Kentucky, we have the Stable account is what it's called. And we have that in partnership with Ohio. But every state is a little bit different. There will be a webinar coming up that Gathering Strength is hosting on September 17th. The link for that webinar, specifically talking about ABLE accounts and saving, is linked at the link on this slide. And I'm sure Liz will also be sending out communication to everybody about the upcoming events. So back to Linda. Linda said she wants to save $500 in order to get a dental surgery for her cat. The deadline, according to the veterinarian, is that it should happen within the next 6 months. So if she wants to save $500, she needs to save about $83 a month in order to get to that goal. So things that we might be thinking about, because $83 a month when she has only $65 left over in her income, I don't know that we're going to get there as quickly as we need to. So is there a way that we can increase her available credit to cover this? And if we did that, would she be able to afford the repayment associated with that? For her goal for the rent increase, so if it's a $200 a month rent increase and she's paying half of her rent, the rent for the apartment, her goal would then be $1,200 in a year to be able to keep up with that. So she needs $100 a month. She has 90 days, let's say, to figure that out. So maybe we're talking about, is renewal the best option? Are there more cost-effective housing strategies? Does it make sense to move? Because maybe it doesn't. And then the other goal that we identify is just that emergency savings goal. But because this is an ongoing deadline and the need for that is kind of still to be determined, we want to focus on contributing to the goals that have a deadline before we move into contributing to a goal that's sort of flexible. Otherwise, what may happen here is that we save for the emergency savings and then she has to dip into it for these other two goals. And sometimes that can be very discouraging. So talking about tools and resources around savings. I mentioned roundups. Some banks have that feature available in their apps. There are other apps. Some examples, there's Acorns, Varo, Dave. Those sorts of apps offer that same roundup tool. And then after you meet a certain threshold, it will deposit that money back into your bank account, or they will hold it into a savings account. Two things to say about that. One, be wary of those in-app offers. They could say, for example, we can give you $500 today to be reduced from your next paycheck or your next income. And so we want to be just very careful about kind of getting sucked into those offers because they can sound really attractive and then get us into a situation that we're having to figure out how to pay that back now. The other thing is that these apps, they all offer a variety of different services. Some of them offer a secured credit card option, or they may offer high yield savings accounts, for example. And so we just those are all tools and resources, but just if we use one tool or resource from that app doesn't mean that we have to use all of them. And I point that out because it can be tempting. If you need money now, it can be very tempting to use services. But if you're concerned, um, in this day and age of lots of different scams and online opportunities that sound great but are predatory as we sort of get into them, do research, find out other consumer concerns, other consumer reports. And you can always see if any of the companies that you're looking into have consumer complaints that are presently being investigated by, say, the Federal Trade Commission or the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. When we're talking about savings, I do not recommend using apps like Cash App, Venmo, PayPal, a lot of those services. When we talk about scams, a lot of scam services or scammers, they use these types of apps in order to encourage payment. I've also heard many different stories from individuals about using these kinds of products, and then finding out later on that their money has disappeared. And just because a product offers a debit card does not mean that it is a checking account. That's the other thing to consider. Some of them may be prepaid debit cards. They may have fees that they don't necessarily talk about upfront, or it's in the fine print. And then recurring deposits. As I said, it's more about the habit and building a savings habit than it is about the amount that you're putting into there. So when you're starting out, set a really small weekly goal. Maybe you do your pay period deposit. Maybe your employer payroll management system allows for you to split your direct deposit into multiple accounts. So it would be possible then to put some money into a checking account and some money into a savings account. If your employer offers direct deposit, you will need a bank account for that. But often the direct deposit can be faster and more secure than receiving a paper check. But the one thing that I will mention with direct deposit that's becoming more and more popular is these get paid today, which is kind of like a cash advance on your direct deposit. There are costs associated with that. And it's a little bit like the phrase robbing Peter to pay Paul. But as we're talking about savings accounts, we also want to prioritize where we can high interest or high yield savings accounts. So if you're in the 2.5% to 4.5% range on a savings account, that's pretty good. A lot of your savings accounts that may be attached to your banking apps or your banking accounts are not going to offer nearly that much. But it's also possible with your savings account to have that money deposited right back into the savings account. Many apps offer you to set up goals. And if that's the situation, you can have that interest deposited into a specific goal. So even if our savings account is for an emergency, maybe we're using the interest that we're accruing to save for something fun, like a concert or a vacation. So let's say with Linda, we're back to her. Let's say that we met with her and it's been a month now, so we are checking back in. She's had some changes. So she decided to open a bank account. So she's eliminated $30 a month in check cashing and money order fees that she's having to pay. Often people don't consider like an online transfer such as Venmo, the costs that may be associated with depositing money into those accounts, like at a pharmacy or a grocery store, as being a money order or check cashing fee, but they're all sort of lumped in together. So she got a bank account, $30 a month in fees have gone away. The direct deposit does allow for her to split her check into a bank account and a savings account. She's also using roundups. And in 1 month, just with roundups, she's been able to save $17, which is awesome. She also changed going out with her friends to once a month. And then the other time a month, she has her friends over for a movie night. And that's saving her $25 a month. With this extra money, she increases her minimum payment to $60 a month on her credit card. And now her available credit on that card is $750. So when we talk about credit and credit utilization, she's in a better spot with that. But also that $750 threshold would allow her to use that for her cat's dental surgery if she needed to. Credit. So with credit, a couple of pieces of advice. One, pay on time. If that means splitting the payment into twice a month, that's okay. If it means that you need to call the credit provider and ask for a lower payment, many credit card providers are willing to do that. The caveat with that is that they may ask you to close the account, and they do a settlement, that they give you a lower monthly rate for that. We want to keep all of our credit card balances less than or equal to 30% of the credit limit. That is for each card, but also if you have multiple credit cards across the span of the cards as well. We want to diversify our credit mix. So we don't just want to have only credit cards or only loans. Having a multitude of different ways that you're utilizing credit it does factor into your credit score. Secured cards are an option to help build credit. The one thing when we talk about a secure card, if you've never heard of that, essentially what a secured card is that if you put $100 into your secured credit card, then that is your credit limit. So you're guaranteeing the credit with the initial deposit that you've made. The one thing with secured cards to be aware of is that if you put that money in there, in order to continue to have reported on-time payments, you have to continue to refund that $100. And that can create maybe some different considerations when you're considering a secured card. There are many different assistive technology financing options, which we will talk about later on. But that assistive technology financing generally is going to be lower interest. There are a lot of nonprofits, or what's called a CDFI, or a community development financial institution, that provide some assistive technology financing. And in those instances, their interest rates are typically a lot lower. And we want to be checking our credit report regularly. So prior to the pandemic, this website here, annualcreditreport.com, that is the official website to check your credit for free. If you are not at annualcreditreport.com, you are not in the right place. There's a link later on in this, and I've included some screenshots in a later slide to show exactly what that website looks like, but that is annualcreditreport.com. And just a quick tip, some apps will help landlords and utilities report on-time payments as positive credit. Typically, your landlord or property management company would have to be signed up to be willing to report those things. Utilities are very similar, although more often there are apps that will see an on-time payment for those. If you link your account with the app, they'll see that those are on-time payments and report them as positive credit. That's another helpful way to build credit, particularly if you are someone who does not want to take out credit. In this kind of day and age that we're in, credit is kind of unavoidable. It's everywhere. One thing that I'll say about credit is that the agencies that collect your information and generate those credit scores that they're passing on to lenders who might be giving you loans or financing a car for you or those sorts of things, is that it is better for them to know what your score is than for you to be credit invisible. And the reason for that is if you're a person that maybe has lower credit, um, they kind of know your history, where you're at. A credit score is a point in time analysis of your credit profile. So it's predicting what your ability is to repay what you're borrowing. Um, and so if they know what that is, that's a lot more of a better, it's a better bet than if we don't know what somebody's credit looks like. And so somebody with no credit is what's called credit invisible. You're kind of just a wild card. It's the Wild West. They're not sure what you're going to do with credit. So when we talk about a sample credit report, and I've linked at the bottom of this page a website that kind of goes into more detail about this. But when we talk about a credit report, if you go to annualcreditreport.com, you will see your entire credit profile, but you will not see the score. And we'll talk a little bit about the difference between a report and a score on the next slide. But it's really important. Often when I speak with individuals, they are really curious about the score, but not as curious about what is in the report. And often we assign value to ourselves related to our financial health and what our credit score is. Credit score is just a number showing what's happening at this point in your life. And it is not reflective of your value as a person or your value in being, what's the word that I'm looking for? In deserving to access the things that you want. And so we're not going to use our credit score as a predictor of how we feel about ourselves because everything can change and credit scores fluctuate. They fluctuate. There are many different models for predicting credit. There's different versions of those models, and they're all going to be a little bit different. And so we're not worried about the score. The score is important if you're taking out credit, but when we're just working on our credit profile, we're not worried about it. Some things that you will see in a credit report. At the very top will be all of your personal information. It's going to say who you are, where you live, where you used to live. If they know about your employer, that will be on there. You access your credit report by utilizing your Social Security number, and so that will be accessible there. One thing that you might also see in the personal information section is changes in a name. So like my name is C, but my legal government name is Cynthia. And so on my credit report, it says both of them because I go by both names. But you always want to check that because let's say your name is John Smith and you look and it says that an alternate name that you go by is Joe Smith, but that's not you. There's a potential that they're reporting credit on you that is not, doesn't belong to you. So we'll talk about disputes in a moment, but that is something that you would potentially want to dispute. There will also be public records. So if you've ever had a bankruptcy or you have a lien against a property or an asset that you own, that will be in the public records. That comes directly from the court. Next, we get into the account information. So this is where you're going to see your active accounts, your collection accounts. This is where we'll also see, let's say you had an account that belonged to I have student loans, for example, and my student loan accounts have changed servicers. And so here we might see that it says right now it's owned by X corporation and it used to be owned by A corporation. It's going to say all of the things that you need to know about that account. The account number, if they have it, the last time that you paid, what the terms are, the type of loan or product that you're using. And then it will also, they typically will break them out into positively reported accounts or active accounts, and then they'll have your negatively reported accounts. And at the very bottom of this account information section will also be any accounts that you have had that have been closed. Most of the time, those closed accounts, unless they were sold to somebody else, are just a historical record that will fall off of your account within, or off of your credit report within 7 years. And then the last thing that you'll see at the bottom of the report are any inquiries that you've had. And those are going to only be hard inquiries. So if you're working with a credit company, a credit counseling service, or a financial counselor, and they pull your credit, that will not appear on your report. Inquiries do have an impact on your credit, but it's pretty nominal unless you have quite a bit of inquiry on your report. One thing that should always, always, always be the final thing on the report is the contact information for the creditors. And that is the information if you have, maybe there's something on your report that you don't recognize or you don't recognize the company, that would be the place that you would go to call that company and find out, hey, could you send me verification of this account? I'm not sure what this is. And there's common misconception. Love social media for connection, but social media is filled with misinformation. There's a common misconception that calling to ask about an account reported on your credit report is an automatic acceptance of that debt. That is not true. You can call and ask about the account, ask for the documentation without committing to that debt. But once you receive the documentation that says that the account is yours, if you recognize it, then you would want to start making efforts to get those accounts back on track if they haven't been paid in a while. But if you have something on your account that doesn't look quite right, that would be the opportunity to file a dispute with the credit reporting agency. Most of the time when there's an error on a credit report, it's not a harmful error. It may be that your address isn't correct or that your birthday is off by 1 day or something like that. But there are instances in which it is harming your credit. And so filing disputes, the link that is at the bottom of this page will take you to resources about filing credit disputes. So you talked about the credit report. What is the difference between a credit report and a credit score? The report is going to have all the activity, all the history of you as a consumer. They're going to look at your credit report to kind of understand details more if you're attempting to take out credit. A score, as I mentioned before, is a point in time analysis that represents your credit worthiness. A higher score indicates that you're more credit responsible. Lower score could indicate that you've had some trouble recently with keeping up with your obligations. A lot of folks had their credit impacted by the pandemic with the change in their income if their jobs got shut down and they weren't able to pay their rent. Evictions are something that will show up on your credit report if you've ever been through that kind of a scenario. But again, I don't really like this term credit worthiness because I don't want anybody to assign their worth or value about their financial lives to this number. It's all very arbitrary. I don't know if you know that video game, The Sims, where they walk around with the little green triangle on their head, but like you're not walking around with the little number of your credit score on your head. And so we're not using that to indicate whether or not we can work on our financial lives because we can all do that. Very similar to credit is debt.
Hey,
So,
C,
yes.
would this be an okay time to take some questions?
Oh, absolutely.
Or do
Yes.
you, okay, so one, just a couple of statements, one point of clarity that people have asked about and we've had some other professionals who are watching, but we have people with disabilities as well. And that is that in the example, Linda gets SSI and is also working part-time, but that part-time income will reduce her SSI by a proportion. There's a formula involved. You didn't get into all those details, but there was the point made that we didn't want some people with disabilities watching this to think that they can get a part-time job and not have their SSI affected. But we're going to get into a great deal of detail about this in two upcoming webinars. The Working While on Benefits is in October, and that's where we'll get into a lot of detail about the effect of working on SSI and do all those calculations. So I just wanted to say that. There has been a question about, see if you could talk about the difference between a credit card and a debit card and the relative, value or worth or pros and cons of those.
Yeah, and thank you for mentioning about employment. Yes, I pulled these numbers just kind of generically to give you an idea about a budget, but yes, there are different adjustments that are made, and on that October 8th webinar, those kinds of things will be addressed. But as far as the difference between a debit card and a credit card, so a debit card is attached to mostly, sometimes there are prepaid ones, but a debit card is attached to a checking account. And so a debit card is making funds available that you already have. You've earned that money, it's sitting in an account. And so when you're using a debit card, you're using money that you don't have to pay back. When you're using a credit card, you've taken out a line of credit with that credit provider. And so that means that they're guaranteeing the money right now with the expectation that you will pay it back. And so when we're talking about a credit card, it's money that we have not yet earned, but that we are stating an intention of paying back. There are times, for example, with fraud and scams and things like that, there are times where folks may be advised to use a credit card if they're, for example, making a purchase online, because a credit card has a limit associated with it. And so the limit often very much depends on your credit score. But if someone were to get a hold of your credit card data, they would only be able to take out a limited amount of money because you have this credit limit. Whereas if you're using a debit card, the funds that you have in there are however much money you have, right? And so there are benefits to using a credit card with the caveat that you are able to pay it back. The other thing that I would just say about that is that they will give you a minimum monthly payment to repay on your credit cards. And typically that monthly amount is just covering the interest. So if we want to make a dent into like repaying the credit card to pay the limit down, often we have to pay more than what that minimum amount is. So that's kind of the difference.
Okay, another question was about, does the number of accounts you have affect your credit report or score?
It does, yes. So there's two things. One is the number of accounts or the mix of accounts that you have on there. The other one is the length of your credit history. So this comes into play often when folks may be thinking, oh, I haven't used that credit card in a while, I'm going to close it. But if that is averaging the length of your credit history longer, getting rid of those cards could actually make your credit score go down. When we're talking about the number of accounts, let's say you have 3 credit cards and all of them have $500 limits on them. So you have a $1,500 credit limit total. If you close one of those cards, then your credit limit total has gone down. And so depending what you're spending on those other cards, it could affect your credit utilization that we want to keep under 30%.
Okay, there are a few other questions, but we're at about 11 minutes after 3, so I don't know how much more you have to go through. So if you have some more, then we can answer some more questions when you're done. One of them is about assistive technology loan funds, and I think you have a link later for whoever was asking that question. There is a link because different loan funds are different, so we can't say definitively one thing. All right, I'll stop and see. Just know we have a little bit of limited time, and if we can do another bit of question answering at the end, that would be great.
Absolutely. All right. So talking about debt, there are different types of debt. So there are installment loans, where typically your repayment amount is the same every month. There's revolving debt, which credit cards fit into that. It kind of fluctuates depending on your needs. There are many different ways to pay down debt. One is the snowball method, which is the smallest balance first and then progressively moving to the higher balances. There's the avalanche method, which is using your highest interest account and paying that down first. And there's multiple different options. When we talk about financial counseling in a little bit, a financial counselor can just be really helpful in figuring out those different methods. There is a link again on this slide. The quick tip here is about visiting the annualcreditreport.com to view your currently reported debt. This link will take you to the right website, which looks like this. It will say the only source authorized by federal law at the top of it. Prior to the pandemic, you could only pull your credit report, as the name suggests, once a year. Now you can check it up to once a week. And it probably is not going to fluctuate a whole lot unless you've taken out credit, but you can check it as often as you need to, particularly if you have a concern that you might have some identity theft or a scam that you have been fallen victim to. And so always use this as your option. You'll be able to see from 3 credit bureaus, Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion, which are the 3 most common credit bureaus. There are other ones. Those are the 3 most common. So there are different options. Lots of people are familiar with Credit Karma. Credit Karma does not report across all 3 bureaus. They also don't use the most updated score formula. And so your score might look a little bit different to a lender than it does to you if you pull information on Credit Karma. When you go to annualcreditreport.com, this is the 3rd time I'm putting this in here because it is so easy to go to the wrong website. They're not going to ask you to put in payment information ever. So if you are at a site that says put in your credit card information for a trial to see your stuff, you're at the wrong place. More common now than ever is buy now, pay later options. So things like Klarna or Afterpay or those sorts of options that allow you to split your money or your payment for something into maybe 4 payments, for example. And then we also have cash advance options. These are not good credit building options, and they can be really hard for getting into what's called a debt trap, which is just like not being able to keep up with the payments and maintain the high interest. It's also not always easy to understand the terms of the repayment, and things can get a little bit tricky or challenging. Buy now, pay laters, particularly, were not being reported on credit reports for a long time. It's starting to become more common now. And so some folks were using it with this expectation it's not going to be reported on my credit. So, like, if I don't pay it back exactly perfectly, it's going to be fine. Not going to be fine anymore. With debt relief and credit repair, these are things that people hear about a lot on TV or on social media. You want to be wary of paid programs. Um, they can be very costly for not a lot of results. The kind of um, more effective and safer option is consumer credit counseling services. The link that's on here will take you to the federal government's list of approved consumer credit counseling agencies. Locally, we have an organization called Apprizin. One thing to maybe consider when you're thinking about consumer credit counseling services is that most of them are technology first agencies. And so if you need an in-person engagement, that's something to consider. Scams. The one thing that I'll say about scams really quickly is that we want to remember this acronym SURF. If they are employing scare or fear tactics, asking you to make a decision or make an action immediately, or there's going to be some sort of consequence. If what happens, the message that you receive or the text that you get seems very random, that's a red flag. And then the last one is phishing. So there's an example on the next page down here at the bottom where it says, look at what I found, with a little link that is like one of those shortened links. We want to be really careful about any kinds of random messages that we maybe are receiving. One that's going around a lot recently is you didn't show up for your jury duty. And so if you don't click this link right now and reschedule, then we're going to take you to jail. That's absolutely not how that works. And so my quick tip for working or thinking about scams, if you're unsure of who you're talking to, or you're unsure about, it feels kind of weird and you don't know what to do, you don't have to answer immediately. You can say, I'll take your information and call you back if they're calling you. If it's a text, you can go to the internet, and most of the time you can put in the like copy and paste the text message and put it into the internet to see if other people have said that's a scam. If you feel targeted, contact the credit bureaus to freeze your credit, call your bank for them to put a flag on your account, and you can report to your local state attorney general's office, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, and the Federal Trade Commission. There's a form, and I have the link to that coming up. Okay, so where to get help? My really quick tip on this is if you're trying to assess where to get help immediately, as a bank customer, it's often a benefit of being a part of a bank or a credit union to have access to classes or a one-on-one appointment that you can have with a banker. That can be a really great place to start. But there are also different options. One is financial empowerment centers. So this is all free one-on-one certified financial counseling. This link will take you to a map of the US where there are different financial empowerment centers across the country. So you can see if there's one close to you that will accept your address as a part of their footprint. They'll work on debt, credit, savings, life and legacy planning is the new one. And then banking and budgeting is the other one. What's maybe different from financial counseling compared to the consumer credit counseling is that consumer credit counseling services are authorized to do debt management and negotiation on your behalf. There is typically a cost associated with that, but if you are utilizing a nonprofit service, it's typically pretty low and can exist on a sliding scale. And for folks on the call who have a disability, many of those services will provide either free or very low cost consumer credit counseling for individuals with a disability. You can go to your local public library. I linked our public library here, but there are many online resources that they offer, like LinkedIn Learning courses and some in-person sessions. And then there are also bank or credit union resources, which I mentioned before, but lots of different curriculums that exist out there. And this link here will take you to the FDIC's website. That's their Consumer Resource Center. So Disability Services Office, this link here will take you to the Health and Human Services federal website. Human relations. So we have here in Kentucky our Human Relations Commission that deals with housing discrimination. They do bad faith debt collection concerns and any sort of other consumer concerns that are related to someone being discriminated against or targeted because of a protected class. The Attorney General will do state-specific fraud reporting. They often have a form that you can fill in to give the information. They'll do the investigation. You don't always, when you report, you don't always hear back what the results of that is, but it's important still to report to your Attorney General, the Federal Trade Commission, and the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, because it helps them to track trends and to see, if it's happening to 10,000 people, then it's like easier for them to like enforce for those bad actors to stop doing what they're doing. Health and Human Services is a great place to go for benefits supports outside of disability resources and to just get general information about projects that may exist in your state or community. I talked about work supports, but you can use this website that's linked here to find a certified work incentive coordinator near you that can help with those benefits calculations that were mentioned before. I linked again the ABLE National Resource Center here to learn about local ABLE accounts and other resources that exist for consumers. The National Disability Institute has an entire financial wellness page with tons of different resources and opportunities, not only for consumers, but also for practitioners who may want to be more intentional about serving individuals with disabilities. And then the assistive technology supports. So this link here will take you to a list of all of the alternative financing programs that the National Disability Institute has collected. Here locally, we have the Appalachian Assistive Technology Loan Fund, but there are different supports. And as Liz mentioned, they all work a little bit differently. They all have some different requirements, and their benefits may vary. Budget calculators and tools. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau has many, many resources. They're potentially under fire with the federal government right now. So for how long those resources will exist, I don't know. The Federal Reserve System, this website will take you to tons of tools and resources. There's different events for practitioners and for consumers. And it's also an opportunity to give feedback about basic banking trends and opportunities. AI like ChatGPT or Gemini can be really useful if you're just looking for a first place to start. Put your numbers in and ask it to do a budget for you just to give you a preliminary idea. I know there are some ethical concerns around AI, but if it's helpful or useful, do with that information what you will. And then utilizing the benefits of your banking apps and knowing the different things that your banking apps can do, or products like Monarch Money, You Need a Budget, different apps that allow for integration with your bank account. Again, be wary of in-app offers with those. So, next steps. After this presentation, we want to set two goals, one short within the next 30 days and one long within the next 60 to 90 days. Maybe pick a budgeting tool and try it out, see how it works. Go to that Able account webinar that's coming up on the 17th of September. Learn more about Able, the benefits of those accounts. Go to annualcreditreport.com and pull your free credit report, see what's going on across the three bureaus, and then connect with a resource like the Financial Empowerment Center. And my one quick tip is when you're budgeting, when you're thinking about your financial life, include others that live in your household or who you share finances with, including children. Sometimes it can be very beneficial to talk to your children about, we're saving for this thing and we can't get it until we have the savings for it, because it helps them to understand things they should be looking out for in their own financial lives. And then the last thing that I'll just say is there's no quick fix. Generic budgeting looks the same across, all different populations, all different people, ages, but the specific circumstances that you're living with are going to change your approach. The other thing that I'll just say is don't pay for help if you can get it for free. See if a free resource exists before you pay for one. And everybody has financial resilience. Even if you feel like you're in a hard spot right now, we're going to get it figured out. And so don't give up, hang in, hold on, we'll get it. So I think we have just like a couple minutes for questions.
I want to get two questions in if we can. One was
Sure.
asked twice. If we freeze our credit for security or safety reasons, do we need to unfreeze it before obtaining the credit report from annualcreditreport.com?
You do not need it to pull the report. If you were going to take out credit, you would have to.
Okay. So also, this was a credit card, debit card question. Is it true that you can spend even if you don't have money with your credit card, whereas a debit card, you can only spend what you have? Is that correct?
So the credit limit is what matters when you're talking about a credit card. So you can't go over that amount. However, the caveat with that is that if you've spent something that hasn't come out of your credit card yet, so it won't show as contributing to the balance, you may go over your credit amount in that kind of an
Well,
instance.
I think the point is that, and she may correct me if I'm wrong, a credit card, the debit card is tied to your bank account. You can't spend more than is in your bank account, whereas with a credit card, if you have a $2,000 limit or a $500 limit, but you don't have that in the bank, you can still use that credit card, which is why it can be dangerous because it also charges interest. So,
Absolutely. Yeah,
okay.
that's interest is what the bank or the credit provider charges for guaranteeing this money that you don't have. Yeah.
Right. Okay, so let's stop there. Thank you so much, C, for this all this wonderful information. Folks, you're going to get a survey automatically, and it will have the link to the form for getting your CEUs. It's also in the chat. Look in the chat right now for some of these links. I'll keep this webinar open so you can look in the chat. And I'm just going to see if one other person, okay. So I think that's all I have to say, other than thanking our ASL interpreters, thanking C again, and Abigail and Aaron behind the scenes who were helping move through all the questions. We have two more webinars, and also, folks, the email systems are really doing a number on our emails. So please check your junk, spam, quarantined, and promotions if you're looking for an email from us, especially about CEUs. So with that, I'll say goodbye and thanks again for showing up and joining us today.